All right, who here saw this? Who here knows who this person is? Who is she? Where did she come from? And why is she serving as Premier of New South Wales? Who here can answer me that question? All right, New South Wales grants, quote, new freedoms to the double vaccinated. That's right. Who here saw this? What an absolute disgrace, ladies and gentlemen. We see the divisiveness ramping up, and it's just something that we thought that we would never see. I'm going to play a little clip to you from a couple of days ago with Gladys Berejiklian talking about these so-called proposed freedoms, and then we're going to show you what these so-called freedoms are.
I'm so pleased and grateful that New South Wales has already hit the 6 million jabs. And Dr. Chant and our team had conversations this morning about what's possible now because we've hit that milestone, and I look forward to making that announcement on Thursday or Friday this week as to what fully vaccinated people will be able to do.
Notice how casual she is. She just has to, slide it in there that there'll be freedoms returning for people that have been vaccinated. And then she just jumps straight on to the next topic like she hasn't said anything unusual, but actually it is unusual. It's discriminatory. And these types of rules, one set of rules for one set of society versus one set of rules for another, is going to create a very polarizing climate that could end very badly. So what are these so-called freedoms? And by the way, they're not real freedoms. What they are simply breadcrumbs. The government has taken the whole loaf of bread from the people, and now they're feeding back little breadcrumbs to those who, quote, do the right thing, and those who comply, and those who go and get the jab, get a little pat on the back and get to feel like they're doing something good. So let's take a look at what they're doing here, shall we? All right. New South Wales government, straight from the horse's mouth. New freedoms for vaccinated, first step state roadmap out of COVID. All right, what are they saying here? People across New South Wales who have received both doses of a COVID-19 vaccine will be allowed more freedoms. All right, first of all, the government should never be in a position where they allow us to be free. Okay, freedom is it's an attribute granted by something much more powerful than government. So the very fact that they're even using this type of rhetoric, we're going to allow you to do this, we're going to allow you to do that. You, the measly civilians, and we, the politicians on nice, healthy, six-figure incomes. Anyway, it says here that New South Wales hit a target of 6 million jabs. All right. It says, following consultation with Dr. Kerry Chant and her team, as well as the New South Wales chief psychiatrist, Dr. Wright, the following individual freedoms will be allowed. This word allowed, it really irks me. They shouldn't be using it. Anyway, for adults who have received both doses of the COVID-19 vaccine from 12:01 a.m. Monday, those who live outside the LGAs of concern, outdoor gatherings of up to 5 people, including children, will be allowed in a person's LGA or within 5 kilometers of home. So that's the reward. There you go. We're going to give you your freedoms back and allow you to meet outdoors with 4 people of your choice. Yeah, we're the government and we're giving you your freedoms back. What an absolute joke. What an absolute joke. Does anyone actually follow these rules? Are you in New South Wales? Do you actually follow these rules? Or do you just look at them and burst out laughing? Anyway, goes on to say here, for those who live in the LGAs of concern and who have responded to the call out to get vaccinated, households with all adults vaccinated will be able to gather outdoors within the existing rules for 1 hour only outside curfew hours and within 5 kilometers of Sydney. All right, we get to go and socialize for 1 hour outside of curfew, but it has to be done within 5 kilometers of our home. And this is what the New South Wales government refers to as, quote, freedoms. This is just absolute tyranny, ladies and gentlemen. And these types of restrictions on our freedom have no place in a civil society. What an absolute disgrace. What an absolute disgrace. The New South Wales government is even referring to this nonsense as freedoms. All right, it goes on to say here, as part of the roadmap, when the following targets are hit, freedoms will be as follows. 70% full vaccination, a range of family, industry, community, and economic restrictions to be lifted. A range of them, right? So not all of them, but a range of them. And nobody knows what that range might be. It all depends what the almighty and powerful government says. All right, it goes on to say here, 80% full vaccination, further easing of restrictions on industry, community, and the economy. So what does that mean? Notice they like to leave these statements incredibly broad and generalized. They sound nice when you read it, but then in reality, it could really mean anything. All right, it goes on to say here, Deputy Premier John Barilaro said the roadmap is our path to freedom. Does this man really know what freedom is? And our biggest incentive to get vaccinated. That's right. That's right. The government is dangling the carrot of freedom over your head because there's something that they really, really want you to do. And they just... What greater incentive then can there be than the restriction of your freedom? If you don't do A, B, and C, you won't be free. But if you do A, B, and C, you will be free. Well, what we know based on Israel is that they did A, B, and C, D, and they went all the way in Israel, and they have the most draconian lockdown measures that they've ever experienced. In Israel, you've got a situation where parents can't take their little toddlers out to meet other families unless they subject these young kids to a PCR test. Is that what freedom looks like? Or does the Australian government have a different idea? Can we trust the Australian government when they say they're going to restore our freedoms? I don't think so. I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them. Anyway, goes on to say here, having a meal with loved ones or having a drink with friends is just around the corner. Oh, that freedom's so close, but there's something that you really need to do before we do that. But to get it out there, we need to keep up momentum. 2 vaccine doses leads to around 90% overall reduction in transmission of the virus. And that was coming from Brad Hazard. So 2 doses leads to around 90% overall reduction of transmission of the virus. Well, you know what I would like to see? I would like to see a debate between Brad Hazard and the Prime Minister of Israel, because over in Israel, they're recording positive test results like they've never seen it before, and they've cracked about 70% vaccinated over in their country, with the majority of those people receiving 2 doses, but at least 1.5 million Israelis receiving not 1, not 2, but 3 doses. Yet the PCR tests are going absolutely bonkers over there, and they're getting heaps of hospitalizations. So what's going on? Is Brad Hazard correct when he says that 2 vaccine doses leads to around 90% overall reduction in transmission? So if that's the truth, then how do you explain what's going on in Israel? Can someone please ask Brad Hazard that? Oh, you better not, actually. He might get angry and storm out of the room, right? This guy's like an immature child. All right, so here's what's going on in Israel, right? They've lowered COVID eligibility, and they're really pushing people to go and get their 3rd jab because they're registering all these positive PCR tests. Look at this. Israel is undergoing a surge in COVID infections from the highly contagious Delta variant, registering close to 10,000 cases on Monday alone. And this is a small country, Israel, by the way, despite a wide vaccination intake. So why do you think this is happening, ladies and gentlemen? Why did Israel register close to 10,000 positive PCR test results with a population that is slightly under 70% vaccinated, most of them receiving 2 doses, some of them 3, just a few of them receiving 1? What's going on, and why are there hospitalizations? Why are there hospitalizations in Israel, and a fair few of them, given their high vaccine uptake rate? I'm trying to work it out, but I just can't. All right, so let's take a bit more of a look. So yeah, Israel's struggling despite the mass vaccinations. And according to the so-called experts in Israel, the widespread community transmission has been attributed to Israelis flouting mask requirements. All right, so they went and got vaccinated thinking they were going to get their freedoms back. They took off their masks, and now they're being blamed for spreading the virus. All right, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? All right, so they've got restrictions, water parks, museums. No, it's just not happening. They got the green pass over in Israel, so you got to show your vaccination status. People are bringing in their little toddlers, holding them down, subjecting them to this inhumane treatment, getting them tested. And they reckon that the experts, it's because people don't want to wear face masks after they've gone and gotten the jab not once but twice. It's been backed up, so there's travel restrictions from in and out of the country, restrictions on where people can go to eat, and it looks like just absolute mayhem over there. So I've got a little clip here from the Israeli Prime Minister. He made some pretty interesting remarks. Now he's actually on record himself, and he stated that the Pfizer vaccine was not as effective as what they thought it would be in relation to the so-called Delta variant. He's on record saying that. But he's also made another very interesting remark in relation to those who have received 2 doses. According to Prime Minister Bennett over in Israel, they are actually the most vulnerable. But it's not what you think. It's not what you think. I'm going to play the clip for you and make up your own mind.
נקודה חשובה מאוד שהציבור חייב להפנים, ואני חושב שהרוב לא מבינים עדיין. הציבור הפגיע ביותר באופן פרדוקסלי כרגע זה אלה שעשו 2 חיסונים ועוד לא את השלישי. למה? כי הם מסתובבים בתחושה כאילו הם מוגנים, כי הם עשו את 2 החיסונים. הם לא מבינים שהחיסון השני דעך אל מול הדלטה, וחייבים מהר להתחסן בחיסון השלישי. לכן אנחנו, כל אחד מאיתנו, גם חברי הכנסת גלעד קריב שהוא צעיר ואיתמר בן גביר שהוא צעיר, יש הרבה מאוד צעירים שהם חולים קשה עם אשפוז. זה הגיל הפגיע ביותר, כי מי שלא יתחסן בכלל הוא מודע לזה כבר 1.5 שנה, וכנראה הוא יושב באיזה חדר סגור.
So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. The problem with the double vaccinated is not that they could be transmitting the virus under ordinary circumstances, but it's they could be overconfident. So they could be engaging in behavior that could spread the virus, whatever that means, right? Whatever that means, they've thrown risk out the window. They're living life dangerously after their 2nd jab, and that's what makes them the most vulnerable people. There you go. That is some really sick and twisted, demented logic coming from the Prime Minister of Israel, and it's just, what can you say? There's almost no words. Whatever argument you throw, there seems to be some sort of, twisted justification. Anyway, go ahead and put your thoughts in the comments below, because really I wanted to show these 2 examples, New South Wales and Israel, because Israel promised their people exactly what the New South Wales government is promising their people, and the freedoms did not materialize for the people of Israel. So what real reason do we have to believe that it's going to be any different over here? I've got my final thoughts here on this segment, so just going to move myself out of the way. Let's see, let's get me out of the way. All right, so these are my thoughts. And now just to make it perfectly clear, these are my opinions. I am not trying to portray in any way, state or form that my opinions equal fact. All right, so opinions are subjective. I believe I have reasonable grounds for having these opinions. In saying that, I'm not saying necessarily that I'm right. And if you disagree with me, put your thoughts in the comments, and I'm just going to start reading. All right, full disclosure. All right, opinion does not equal fact. All right, 1. By selectively granting liberties based on vaccination status, the New South Wales government is fueling division, resentment, marginalisation, and creating a social climate ripe for violence and civil unrest. All right, do you agree or disagree? 2, the term new freedoms coined by the New South Wales government is deceptive and not indicative of the true spirit of freedom. 3, no evidence exists that the New South Wales government will restore complete freedom to anyone, let alone the vaccinated. 4, freedom is not granted by government, it's granted by something much more powerful. 5, the New South Wales government is following a historic formula of citizenry control. And it goes like this. A, issue a reason to strip and withhold freedom from citizens. B, demand that citizens comply with requests and promise to restore freedom to those who do. C, gradually reinstate freedoms but never fully restore freedoms in order to keep the compliant obedient and dependent on the government. Continue to punish and coerce the non-compliant by withholding freedoms. D, outlaw and crack down on any type of opposition from the non-compliant. All right, so again, if you agree, disagree, put your thoughts in the comments. All right, outcome. Again, totally my opinion. I could be wrong. All right, and if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be wrong. All right, outcome. Government achieves dominating control over the citizenry and becomes widely recognized as the savior of humanity and provider of life itself. The compliant forgets the freedoms they once had and develops a false sense of gratitude for their captors. The non-compliant are continually targeted by the government and shunned by their fellow citizens. All right, so those are my final thoughts on the segment in relation to the strategy that the New South Wales government is deploying there in relation to giving a few little so-called freedoms to those who are compliant and punishing those who are not compliant. We've seen studies in relation to Stockholm Syndrome where those who are enslaved end up developing some type of relationship or end up feeling a false sense of gratitude towards their captors and that sort of thing. So it's not unusual in history. There has been many regimes, maybe you can mention some in the comments below, that stripped citizens of all of their freedoms and then bit by bit started feeding a little bit back. So you could imagine if you've lost everything and then you get given a slice of bread, you might feel pretty happy about it. Well, because hey, it's one step above everybody dying, right? So whereas I don't think it's something that anyone should feel grateful for, because in my opinion, the freedoms in question that were stolen were unlawfully seized by an overarching government that had abused its power. So my opinion is that feeling grateful for these so-called restorations of freedom, such as what the New South Wales government is issuing, I say is completely misplaced, and it's on par to feeling grateful that somebody down the street decided not to punch you in the head. You understand what I'm saying here? It's just, it should be expected that people randomly in the street do not assault other people, right? So therefore, I should not have to thank a random stranger for not assaulting me. I should not have to thank the government for allowing me to do what I consider to be a God-given right, which is the right to live in freedom. If you agree with me, put it in the comments. If you see it differently, put it in the comments.